How well do we really know the people we trust with our family's future? When my daughter passed away, grief left me searching for ways to keep her memory alive. Supporting her husband felt like the right thing to do. Each year, I sent him $50,000. At first, it seemed noble, a gesture of loyalty, a way of protecting what she left behind. But loyalty has stages. It feels noble at first, then it blinds, and finally, it destroys. In the beginning, his silence felt respectful. Perhaps he was too overwhelmed to speak. Later, that silence grew heavier, almost suffocating. Was it gratitude he couldn't express? Was it shame that kept him quiet? Or was it something darker, manipulation hidden behind grief? That uncertainty gnawed at me, but I buried it under routine. Seniors know this tension well, the pull between wanting to believe in family and fearing betrayal. Then came the moment that shattered everything. My grandchild's voice cut through the silence. "Grandpa, you need to know the truth." In that instant, the illusion cracked. A decade of sacrifice, a decade of loyalty, a decade of believing I was protecting her legacy, all thrown into question. What if the person you trusted most was quietly deceiving you? What if your generosity wasn't preserving memory, but feeding a lie? And yet, what if his silence wasn't deception at all, but grief too heavy to bear? That ambiguity keeps us guessing, because the truth is rarely as simple as we want it to be. Loyalty blinds, and when it destroys, it doesn't just take money, it takes peace of mind, it takes trust, it takes the very heartbeat of family. Picture this, an old man sitting at his desk, the checkbook open, pen trembling in his hand. He wants to believe he's honoring his daughter, but the weight of doubt presses harder than the ink on the page. That image lingers, because it's not just about me, it's about anyone who has ever wondered if love and loyalty were being used against them. So I leave you with this piercing question: would you cling to the illusion, even if it cost you everything? Can kindness become a burden when money ties us to secrets? For years, I believed generosity was my strength. Writing those checks felt like an act of love, a way to honor my daughter's memory. But generosity, when repeated year after year, begins to carry its own weight. What starts as compassion can quietly turn into obligation, and obligation can become a chain. Seniors know this feeling well, the moment when giving no longer feels free, but heavy, almost suffocating. At first, I told myself the money was helping. Perhaps it was easing his struggles, perhaps it was keeping the family afloat. Yet as the years passed, doubt crept in. Was I truly helping, or was I simply feeding a silence I didn't understand? Generosity without boundaries can blind us to motives, bind us to people who may not deserve it, and drain not just our savings but our spirit. The envelope sealed, the check signed, year after year, the same motion. Each repetition carried more weight than the last, yet silence remained. No words of gratitude, no explanation, no glimpse into how that money was used. Was it honoring my daughter's memory, or vanishing into shadows I never dared to question? That uncertainty grew heavier than the grief itself. Because generosity, when unchecked, can become a burden that erodes peace of mind. And the most unsettling thought is this: what if the very act of giving was not preserving family, but quietly destroying it? My grandchild's warning echoed in my mind, forcing me to confront what I had avoided. Was my kindness being used against me? Was my loyalty to my daughter's memory blinding me to the truth about her husband? Generosity begins as a gift. Then it becomes a chain. And in the wrong hands, it ends as a weapon. Seniors know this lesson deeply, the importance of protecting not just money, but dignity, legacy, and trust. Picture this: a grandfather at the kitchen table, the envelope resting in front of him, his hands trembling. He wants to believe he is honoring his daughter, but the weight of doubt presses harder than the paper itself. That image lingers, because it is not just about me, it is about anyone who has ever wondered if their kindness was being twisted into something harmful. Because when generosity becomes a burden, it stops being love, and starts becoming a trap. What happens when silence hides more than words ever could? Silence can be comforting in grief, but it can also be unsettling. For years, my son-in-law accepted the money without a word. No thank you, no explanation, no glimpse into how it was used. At first, I told myself his silence was respect, perhaps he was too broken to speak. But as time passed, that silence began to feel heavier, almost suffocating. Seniors know this feeling well, when quiet no longer feels like peace, but like a wall. I wondered if his silence was grief, shame, or something darker. Was he too proud to admit he needed help? Was he drowning in sorrow, unable to find words? Or was his silence not deception at all, but guilt too heavy to confess? That uncertainty gnawed at me, because silence is never empty, it always carries meaning, even if we cannot see it. The ritual continued, the envelope sealed, the check signed, the silence unbroken. Each year, the silence grew louder. It was not just the absence of words. It was the absence of trust. The absence of connection. And with each repetition, the silence became less about grief and more about concealment. Then my grandchild's warning echoed again, "Grandpa, you need to know the truth." Suddenly, the silence was no longer neutral. It was suspicious. It was dangerous. It was the sound of something being hidden. And I realized that silence, when stretched too long, becomes its own kind of deception. The fear sharpened. What if his silence was not grief, but calculation? What if every quiet acceptance of money was not gratitude, but strategy? And yet, what if I was wrong? What if silence was simply the only language he had left after losing her? That ambiguity kept me trapped, torn between compassion and suspicion. Silence can protect, but it can also conceal. It can shield pain, but it can also hide betrayal. And when silence becomes the only response, it forces us to question whether we are honoring memory or feeding a lie. Picture this: a man receiving an envelope, his eyes downcast, his lips pressed shut. He takes it, nods faintly, and walks away. No words, no explanation, just silence. That image lingers, because silence is never just silence, it is a choice, and choices carry consequences. Because when silence stretches across years, it stops being grief, and becomes a mask that hides everything. Would you believe your grandchild if they told you the truth you feared most? For years, I lived inside a quiet rhythm: grief, loyalty, generosity, silence. It was a cycle I never questioned. Until one day, my grandchild broke it. Their voice carried something I hadn't heard in a decade: urgency. "Grandpa, you need to know the truth." Those words didn't just pierce the silence, they shattered it. Seniors know this moment well, when the younger generation sees what we cannot, and forces us to face what we've avoided. At first, I resisted. How could a child know more than I did? How could they understand the weight of memory, the burden of loyalty? But the look in their eyes told me this wasn't childish suspicion. It was knowledge. It was warning. And suddenly, the trust one had built over 10 years felt fragile, like glass ready to break. The fear sharpened: what if everything I believed was wrong? What if the money I sent was not preserving my daughter's legacy, but feeding a deception? And yet, another thought haunted me: what if my grandchild was mistaken? What if their warning was born from misunderstanding, or even resentment? That ambiguity kept me torn, caught between the wisdom of youth and the stubbornness of age. The ritual of giving now felt poisoned. The envelope, the check, the silence, all of it seemed different after those words. Each repetition no longer carried loyalty, but suspicion. Each year no longer honored memory, but raised questions. And the silence of the son-in-law, once tolerable, now felt dangerous. Seniors know the weight of generational trust. We want to believe our grandchildren see clearly, that their perspective is untainted by grief. But we also fear being misled, fear that listening to them might unravel everything we've built. And yet, When truth comes from the mouth of a grandchild, it carries a purity we cannot ignore. Picture this, a grandchild standing in the doorway, voice trembling but firm, eyes locked on yours. They are not asking, they are warning. And in that moment, you realize the silence you accepted for years may have been hiding something far more painful than grief. Because when a grandchild dares to break the silence, it stops being suspicion, and becomes a truth you can no longer escape. How many family secrets stay buried until someone dares to dig? Secrets have a way of hiding in plain sight. For 10 years, I believed silence was harmless, generosity was noble, and loyalty was unshakable. But when my grandchild spoke, those beliefs began to unravel. Suddenly, I was forced to ask, what was really happening beneath the surface of this family story? Seniors know this moment well, when the comfort of routine is shattered by the suspicion that something has been concealed all along. At first, I resisted the thought. Could there truly be secrets buried in the quiet exchanges, in the envelopes passed without words? Perhaps the money was being used responsibly, perhaps the silence was grief. But the warning from my grandchild made me wonder, what if the truth was far more unsettling? What if the silence was not grief, but cover? What if the generosity was not support, but fuel for something hidden? The repetition of giving now felt like a ritual masking reality. Each year, the envelope left my hands, but what it touched afterward was unknown. Bills? Debts? Or something I would never want to imagine? Secrets thrive in shadows, and shadows had surrounded this arrangement for far too long. The fear grew sharper. What if the son-in-law had built a life on deception, using my loyalty as his foundation? And yet, another possibility lingered. What if the secret was not betrayal, but desperation? What if he was drowning in guilt, unable to confess how deeply he had failed? That ambiguity kept me suspended between compassion and suspicion, unwilling to accept either fully. Seniors understand the weight of secrets. They are not just hidden facts, they are burdens carried across generations. And when secrets finally surface, they do not just expose the truth, they reshape the family itself. Picture this, a locked drawer in a quiet house, papers stacked inside, numbers scribbled across them. Each sheet tells a story of money spent, debts hidden, choices concealed. The drawer stays closed, but the weight of its contents presses against everyone who lives under that roof. That image lingers, because secrets are never just secrets, they are silent forces shaping everything around them. Because when family secrets stay buried too long, they stop being protection, and become the very chains that hold us captive. Is loyalty to the past worth risking the future of your family? Loyalty is often seen as a virtue. For me, it was the thread that tied me to my daughter's memory. Every check I wrote, every dollar I sent, felt like a promise kept. But loyalty, when stretched across years, begins to demand a price. Seniors know this truth well, the moment when devotion to yesterday collides with responsibility for tomorrow. At first, loyalty felt noble. I believed I was protecting her legacy, shielding her husband, and keeping her presence alive. Yet as time passed, I began to wonder, was I honoring her memory, or was I sacrificing my family's future? Loyalty can blind us, convincing us that devotion is always good, even when it quietly erodes what we should be protecting. The ritual of giving became heavier. Each envelope carried not just money, but a piece of my grandchildren's inheritance, a piece of their security. And with every silent acceptance, I asked myself, was I being loyal to my daughter, or disloyal to the grandchildren who still needed me? That tension grew sharper with each passing year. The grandchild's warning forced me to confront what loyalty had cost. 10 years of sacrifice had not only drained resources, but had also built a wall of silence between us. Loyalty had blinded me to deception, and in doing so, it had risked the very future of the family I was trying to protect. But here's the unsettling thought, loyalty is not always betrayal. Sometimes it is desperation, sometimes it is fear, sometimes it is guilt. And yet, when loyalty demands too much, it becomes destructive. Seniors understand this conflict deeply, the pull of memory against the weight of responsibility. Picture this, a grandfather holding two photographs. In one, his daughter smiling, a reminder of love and loss. In the other, his grandchildren, eyes bright with hope for the future. His hands tremble as he realizes that loyalty to one may be costing the other. That image lingers, because it is not just about me, it is about anyone who has ever struggled to balance devotion to the past with duty to the future. Because when loyalty costs too much, it stops being virtue, and becomes a burden that threatens everything we hold dear. What do our grandchildren see that we sometimes miss? Perspective changes everything. For 10 years, I believed I was protecting my daughter's memory, honoring her life through loyalty and generosity. But my grandchild saw something I could not. Seniors know this moment well, when the younger generation, unburdened by grief's weight, notices truths we've overlooked. Their eyes are sharper, their instincts less clouded, and their courage often greater than we expect. At first, I dismissed their warning. How could they understand the depth of loss, the sacredness of loyalty? But the certainty in their voice unsettled me. It wasn't suspicion born of immaturity, it was clarity born of observation. They had watched the silence, they had seen the ritual, and they had pieced together what I refused to admit. The fear grew sharper. Had I been blind all along? Was my devotion to memory blinding me to deception? And yet, another thought lingered, perhaps my grandchild's perspective was not about betrayal, but about protection. Perhaps they weren't tearing down loyalty, but trying to save me from its cost. That ambiguity kept me torn, caught between the wisdom of age and the clarity of youth. Generational vision is powerful. Seniors carry experience, but grandchildren carry fresh eyes. They see patterns we normalize, they question routines we accept, and they challenge truths we cling to. And when they speak, their words carry a purity that forces us to listen, even when we don't want to. Picture this, a grandchild sitting across the table, their hands folded, their gaze steady. They are not pleading, they are not guessing, they are warning. Their voice trembles, but their conviction is unshakable. And in that moment, you realize that the silence you accepted for years may have been hiding something far more dangerous than grief. Because when grandchildren dare to speak, they stop being observers, and become the guardians of truth we can no longer ignore. What if the person you trusted most was quietly deceiving you? Fear doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, soft at first, then sharpens until it consumes everything. For years, I believed silence was grief, generosity was love, and loyalty was virtue. But after my grandchild's warning, every gesture began to feel different. Seniors know this moment well, when trust begins to tremble, and suspicion takes its place. At first, I tried to dismiss the thought. Betrayal seemed too cruel to imagine. Surely his silence was respect, surely my generosity was helping. But the longer I sat with the warning, the more the fear grew. Was I being deceived? Or was I misjudging him, punishing grief with suspicion? Each year of giving replayed in my mind, not as loyalty, but as vulnerability. The envelope sealed, the money sent, the silence returned, all of it began to look like a pattern. And yet, betrayal wasn't the only fear. What if I was losing dignity by clinging to illusions? What if I was isolating myself, too ashamed to admit I'd been wrong? What if the real danger wasn't him, but me, my refusal to face the truth? The fear of betrayal is heavier than betrayal itself. Because suspicion corrodes trust long before truth is revealed. Seniors understand this weight, the sleepless nights, the gnawing questions, the dread of discovering that love has been used against them. Picture this, a grandfather lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every silent exchange. The memory of his daughter's smile collides with the image of her husband's silence. And in that collision, fear takes root, not just fear of betrayal, but fear of losing everything trust once gave him. Because when fear of betrayal enters the heart, it stops being doubt, and becomes a shadow that darkens everything. What happens when family legacy is threatened by hidden hands? Legacy is more than money. It is memory, values, and the future we hope to leave behind. For years, I believed my loyalty was protecting that legacy. But after my grandchild's warning, I began to see the cracks. Seniors know this moment well, when the past we honor collides with the future we must protect. At first, I told myself the money was harmless. A gift, a gesture, a way of keeping her presence alive. But the longer I gave, the more I realized, every envelope carried not just dollars, but pieces of inheritance, pieces of security, pieces of the family's future. And with each silent acceptance, I wondered, was I preserving legacy, or was I quietly dismantling it? The fear grew sharper. What if the son-in-law had built his life on my sacrifice? What if the legacy meant for my grandchildren was being drained into shadows? And yet, another thought lingered: what if the legacy was not being stolen, but neglected? What if silence was not deception, but a failure to protect what mattered most? That ambiguity kept me torn, caught between anger and sorrow. Legacy is fragile. It is not just wealth, but trust passed from one generation to the next. Seniors understand this deeply, the responsibility to safeguard what we have built, so that it endures beyond us. And when betrayal threatens that legacy, it does not just wound the present, it reshapes the future. Picture this: a grandfather opening a box of family heirlooms, photographs, and letters. He sees his daughter's smile, his grandchildren's laughter, and feels the weight of what must be preserved. Yet in the corner of his mind, a shadow lingers, the fear that what he has worked for is slipping away, not into memory, but into manipulation. Because when family legacy is threatened, it stops being inheritance, and becomes a battlefield where trust and deception collide. Would you have the courage to confront the truth face to face? Confrontation is never easy, especially when it threatens the very foundation of family. For years, I lived inside silence, generosity, and loyalty. But after my grandchild's warning, the weight of doubt became unbearable. Seniors know this moment well, when suspicion can no longer remain unspoken, and truth must be forced into the open. At first, I hesitated. Confrontation felt dangerous. What if I was wrong? What if my questions shattered what little peace remained? Yet the longer I waited, the heavier the silence grew. And so, I decided, the time had come to face him. The meeting was simple, yet charged. I handed him the envelope, but this time, I did not let go. My voice broke the ritual: "Tell me. What have you done with this money?" The words hung in the air, sharp, undeniable. For the first time in 10 years, silence was no longer acceptable. His reaction was not immediate. He looked down, his hands trembling, his lips pressed tight. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or was it anger at being exposed? That ambiguity made the moment unbearable. Seniors understand this tension, the dread of discovering betrayal, but also the dread of being wrong. The confrontation was not just about money. It was about trust, about memory, about legacy. Every unanswered question carried the weight of my daughter's smile, my grandchildren's future, and my own dignity. And in that moment, I realized, confrontation is not about winning. It is about demanding clarity, no matter how painful the truth may be. Picture this: a grandfather and a son-in-law sitting across from each other, the envelope between them like a barrier. One demands answers, the other struggles to speak. The air is heavy, the silence louder than words. That image lingers, because confrontation is never just about what is said, it is about what is finally revealed. Because when truth is forced face to face, silence stops being protection, and becomes exposure. How do we balance compassion with caution when family ties are tangled with money? Reflection comes after confrontation. Once silence is broken and truth begins to surface, the weight of years presses down. Seniors know this moment well, when the lessons of experience demand to be faced, even if they are painful. For me, loyalty had felt noble, generosity had felt sacred, and silence had seemed tolerable. But each of these, stretched too far, became dangerous. Loyalty blinded me, generosity chained me, and silence concealed what I should have seen. The confrontation forced me to ask, how do we protect both memory and future without losing ourselves in the process? Compassion is vital. It keeps families connected, it honors those we've lost, it reminds us of love. But compassion without caution can be exploited. It can drain resources, erode trust, and leave us vulnerable to manipulation. Seniors understand this balance deeply, the need to give, but also the need to guard. The lesson is not to stop giving, but to give wisely. Not to stop trusting, but to trust with clarity. Not to silence grief, but to demand honesty alongside it. Because family ties are powerful, but they can also be tangled with motives we cannot see. Picture this, a grandfather sitting with his grandchildren, speaking softly but firmly. He tells them that love must be paired with wisdom, that generosity must be paired with boundaries, that trust must be paired with caution. Their faces listen, their eyes absorb, and in that moment, the lesson becomes legacy. Because when compassion is balanced with caution, it stops being vulnerability, and becomes strength that protects generations to come. What remains when loyalty, generosity, and silence have all been tested? Stories do not end with confrontation, they end with reflection. After years of loyalty, generosity, and silence, I learned that each can be noble, but each can also be dangerous when stretched too far. Seniors know this moment well, when the lessons of a lifetime crystallize into wisdom meant to be passed on. Loyalty blinded me. Generosity chained me. Silence concealed what I should have seen. And yet, even as lessons surfaced, one question remained: had I truly uncovered the whole truth? Suspicion may fade, but the shadow of doubt lingers, reminding us that some answers may never fully come. The legacy I sought to protect was not just money, but trust. Trust between generations, trust in memory, trust in family. And trust, once fractured, is difficult to rebuild. But perhaps that is the final lesson: to guard trust carefully, to pair compassion with caution, and to never let silence become a mask. Picture this, a grandfather surrounded by his grandchildren, their faces lit with curiosity, their voices full of questions. He speaks softly, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He tells them that love must be strong, but wisdom must be stronger. That generosity must be kind, but boundaries must be firm. That silence must be respected, but truth must always be sought. Because when compassion is paired with caution, it stops being weakness, and becomes the shield that guards generations.